2023, I don't have a drink with me. I have nothing. I made a water and then I left it upstairs and I really want to get this video done. So we're just going to roll with it. Thank you for your patience while I did not have internet on Wednesday. It was weirder for me than it was for you, I assure you. Today, we're going to go over our lesson for the day. Again, if you're one of my flex students and you need to catch up on the lesson, or if you just missed things, need to catch up, here we are. I asked you all, as a student, what motivates you to learn? Is it your grades? Is it your post high school life? Is it genuine curiosity? Is it something else? We had a lot of different answers to this so far today. A lot of people are kind of in between some of these, right? They care about their grades. They really want to get out. They want to move on to the real world, but they also like learning about certain things or things that interest them. I think that's pretty fair. When I was in high school, all the way back in 2004 and 5, um, my senior year was kind of a bit of a joke. I got accepted to Purdue in September of my senior year. So in a world now, if I was with all you young whippersnappers, um, I would have just probably graduated early and loaded up on credits and started taking college credits and just whatever, worked for a semester or worked for a year, whatever it might be. But in the case where I was and um the amount of resources I had, I couldn't really do that. I didn't have high speed internet, so I couldn't really do online school, and there weren't a ton of early credit options for my high school at the time. So I was sort of stuck. I took the couple of bare minimum classes I needed to graduate and then a lot of fluff and just downtime. So I was still motivated to learn, but when I was in, my senior English student's shoes, back, in 2005, I I didn't have those options. I was just sort of trying to keep myself occupied. But this all relates to article of the week too, which is up online now. Due in theory today, will get zeroed out on the 20th. Reminder on that in a bit. So I asked my students what their love hate relationship with poetry was, where they were kind of on the spectrum, because we all have our different sort of relationship with poetry. Some of us love it, some of us hate it, some of us are in between. A lot of people have said that they like reading poetry for fun, but when it's shoved down their throat or they are told to think a certain way about it or to do something with it and then gets frustrating, I completely understand that. We rarely like things that we are not left to explore. And so that's the hope with poetry in this unit and with all the literature, honestly, in this class in general, is that I let you all kind of figure it out on your own with some guidance from me. But the nice thing is, for poems like this romantic poetry that we're talking about in Unit 1, it was written in a certain time period. We can frame it in that context and kind of get one meaning behind it. Now, we can always take that poetry, relate it to our own lives, learn something from it. That doesn't change. But we can definitely kind of get a framework for what it's supposed to mean. So we're looking at Wordsworth's I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud. We're going to break it down stanza by stanza, talk about how to read a poem, and then the important stuff here. So I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. So we look at this first stanza. We look at how many lines are in the stanza? Six. We look at where the commas are, where our pauses might be when we read. We restate things and reword things as we need to try to kind of make them make sense to us in 2023. We look at the rhyme scheme. It's an A B C rhyme scheme. Now, the only real reason that we need to know this is because it helps us to read it. We don't really care. This doesn't mean anything, right? It's not like, oh, he used the ABABCC rhyme scheme. Aha. No, it doesn't really matter. But what matters is when we are reading it, remember, poetry is meant to be kind of read out loud, performed a little bit. Even if you're reading it in your own head, you need to read it a certain way to kind of really get the idea of what Wordsworth or any poet was going for here. So in this case, we need to know the rhyme scheme just so we know what words rhyme it as we're reading it. We look at the rhythm, how many syllables each word, each line has. Does that change? Does the rhythm change back and forth? Does it matter? Figurative language, similes, metaphors, uh, all of that, all of those literary devices, and then imagery. So much of this romantic poetry is about nature. So, what we really want to look at is how are these poets painting pictures with words? So I asked my students to look at the punctuation in the second stanza. When you are reading, when should you not pause? This is kind of a weird question, but let's take a look at it and see. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. We really don't want to pause at 10 because it's continuing a sentence. We really want to necessarily pause at 8 and 7 because those are kind of giving us different kinds of clauses. Again, this is kind of a loaded question. I've even told some of my students to skip it after a while because it's not worth it. Which of these best restates the main idea? Basically saying that the daffodils went on forever and they seemed to all be moving at once. They stretched in a never-ending line. There were 10,000 and they were tossing their heads in a sprightly dance. What's the rhyme scheme? We just talked about it. That way, line bay, glance dance. A B, A B, C C. Again, this only really matters so that we know how to read it effectively. Which of the following best describes the meter of the stanza compared to the first one? All of these stanzas have the same meter. Now, the other Wordsworth poem you're going to read for class changes in certain stanzas. The meter changes, but this is kind of the same both ways. Continuous as stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, we're keeping this same tempo the whole time and never going astray. I see. I just did that. I just made that up. It's fun. I'm pretty proud of it. I'm not gonna lie. With the first two lines of the stanza do contain a simile, continuous as the stars that shine. We are comparing the movement of the daffodils to the stars that shine using like or as, so it is a simile. Which line contains personification? Remember, personification, one of those other literary things that we can use to help make our writing better. Wordsworth is having these daffodils that don't have heads typically, tossing their heads in a sprightly dance. So he is adding human qualities to them. That's in line 12. We can This stanza has additional imagery that the speaker really gets joy and happiness from these daffodils dancing. Now as we move on to the third stanza, the waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. What line rhymes with the first lines of the stanza? Well, it's an AB rhyme scheme, CC rhyme scheme, so they and gay lines 13 and 15 rhyme. By the way, gay in this case and jocund both mean happy and joyful. Summarizing the stanza, a poet could not help but be happy with the waves and the daffodils kind of painting this scene for us. Then we look at the final stanza with the imagery. He's saying he didn't think about what this would have brought him, what this would have meant to him, because later on, for often when on my couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude, and then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. So I keep remembering this scene long after I'm done. What does this mean for the romantic theme? Remember, the romantics wanted to take all of this gap in education and in wages and stuff and write for everyone and create art for everyone. So they were using accessible language, common topics, writing for everyone. Everyone can go out and see a field of daffodils and enjoy nature. This was free. You didn't have to have an education. You didn't have to be a duke or duchess to do this. You didn't have to be a baron of industry to do that. Everyone could do it. So we look at Lines in Early Spring, the other poem in your book from Wordsworth. There's the only real notable difference between these two is that the stanzas do change in meter. There's a difference between stanzas 2 and 6, and 1, 3, 4, and 5. So as you read that, you'll notice the the meter changes a little bit, but we're still using sensory imagery. We're still personifying nature. We're talking about nature and God kind of connecting and lamenting. Remember, one of the things we talked about on Monday was the idea that um, the Industrial Revolution, the romantic poetry was a reaction to this. You know, Wordsworth, the speaker of the poem, is sitting in a field and he's enjoying nature, and every little tiny thing seems to be huge and magnificent and wonderful. And he can't help but lament, what have we done to this? What have we done to harm this? What have we done to change this? Yeah, industry, yeah, progress, but what are we doing to this nature that that protects us, that teaches us that we should be learning from and protecting as well? So that's kind of where it connects with the big romantic theme. You've got two articles up. Article 1 is going to get zeroed out later today. Read pages 94 through 96 for Friday. Make sure you're watching these vlogs, like, subscribe, and comment. Add to the Mr. W questions thread if you'd like to have a question on an AMA thread or AMA video later this week. Have a wonderful 3-day weekend. We don't have class on Monday. It's Martin Luther King Day. Go honor the good doctor by doing something cool for somebody else. Have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you on